what I get most walking on the street with this case is violin, or entering a bar, people think violin. Sometimes they say saxophone. That's closer because that's a wind instrument. But of course, you know, as soon as I open this case, that my instrument is the bassoon. As a bassoonist, I am a member of this quintet called Calefax. Calefax is a quintet with an unusual combination of instruments. And of course, my colleagues are here backstage, and they will come on stage, and we will play some music for you. But before we do that, I'm happy to tell you a little bit about the background and the history of the group. This will be a short story about musical invention and about making dreams come true, or one dream at least. So when I say musical invention, I'm quoting a Dutch newspaper that used these words many years ago in a review on one of the first CDs of Calefax. And at the time, I thought these words were way too big, musical invention, for what we were doing. But I did understand what the journalist was referring to, and that is the very specific instrumental lineup of the group, which is a lineup of reed instruments only. So that's wind instruments, like the bassoon as an example, that produce their sound through a reed. And this specific lineup is a musical format, so to speak, that did not exist in the music history until Calefax started working, which is almost exactly 25 years ago. So the classical music is full of very strong traditions, and one of them is the fact that composers for centuries and centuries have been making their music for a very limited amount of musical formats, like the symphony orchestra, the string quartet. They made lots of vocal music, of course, for choir. They made many sonatas for two instruments and solo pieces, of course, the majority of which is written for piano. And it took until the 20th century before they started liberating themselves from this limitation. And they started experimenting, and they started to make new instrumental combinations that fitted their musical ideas. And today, nowadays, everything is possible. Anything you can do as a composer. If you were a composer and you would need, for the expression of your ultimate musical idea, for the ultimate expression of it, you would need, say, 2 trombones, 5 harps, and a double bass. You would just do it, and people would play it here on stage if you were a good composer, which maybe you are. So that's the situation now. And in this abundance of musical possibilities that composers have, the Quintet Calefax, we've chosen a relatively traditional approach, and by sticking to the 5 instruments that we have, the 5 reed instruments, we are inviting composers to limit themselves again and to write music for just this body of sound of the reed quintet. And we have found audiences worldwide that enjoy listening to this new musical format. So that's enough of music history. I'd like to invite my colleagues on stage. Are you there, guys? There you go. And we will... Thank you. I will now demonstrate the instruments to you. And we're not going to do that by playing them one by one. We do it slightly differently. In fact, we made a little composition that allows us to make music while assembling the instruments. Isn't that time management? So what we're going to do is, starting on the reed, this is the very mouthpiece that we all 5 have in common. This is the bassoon reed. It doesn't sound like a bassoon yet. And one by one, we will add pieces to the instruments so that, well, that's a clarinet mouthpiece, for example. So while we do that, the reed quintet will materialize in front of your eyes. So one last thing before we start. You will notice that some instruments are assembled quicker than others, but that's part of the fun. introduce my colleagues. On the clarinet, this is Ivar Berix. The bass instruments of Calefax are myself on bassoon, and on bass clarinet, Jelte Althuis. Thank you. On oboe, this is Oliver Boekhorn. And saxophone, Raaf Hekkema. So, many people say to us, 25 years must be a very long time to work together as musicians, and I agree, actually. But of course, in the context of music history, it's peanuts, it's nothing. I mean, in fact, we missed out on most of music history. So what we did is arranging a considerable amount of masterpieces from the music history. And in doing so, we went all the way back to the music of the Renaissance. And maybe this is how Mozart would have written for the quintet. And why not arrange beautiful romantic piano music, for example, by Spanish composer Granados. And we all five happen to love the music by jazz composer Duke Ellington. So, that's enough for now, maybe. Before we play one other complete piece for you, I would like to tell you a little bit about the more personal history of the group. And this is where the dreaming comes in my story. We are here in Amsterdam, in the center of town, in the old local theater, and only 200 meters away from here is this high school where... It is true. It's this high school that, and 25 years ago, 4 members, students, pupils of this school, were sitting in the orchestra, and we were having a chat with the Dutch composer Willem van Manen, who had just written music for the school orchestra. And we asked him whether he could make a quartet, a piece of music for the 4 of us. He himself added a 5th instrument, the clarinet, and this is how the Reed Quintet was born. This was November 1985. At the time, we didn't have a clue that one can make a living of making music by making music. But we liked what we did, so we went to music college. And I do remember in 3rd or 4th grade having a discussion with my teacher. He asked me, my bassoon teacher, he asked me, how do you see the future as a bassoonist, Alban? And I said, well, I didn't think long. I just said, oh, I'd love to tour the world with a quintet. And, you know, he just laughed. He said, that's not going to work. That's impossible. Forget it. Only the best in chamber music, only the best string quartets in the world can have a career, can live a life, have a life like that. And that's where I started dreaming. That's where I started wanting to prove him wrong. And now here we are, touring the world. I'm very happy, proud to be a member of the group, touring the world with these wonderful colleagues, and we do this with a repertoire of about 100 pieces written for the group and several hundreds of arrangements. So for myself, I can certainly say my dream has come true. And we finished this talk with playing a short piece by the Dutch composer Ton ter Doest, which he wrote for Calefax. But let me just come back briefly on this newspaper quote that I had in the beginning of my talk. And I personally think, realizing that at the moment, in the past couple of years, so many reed quintets are popping up in different countries in the world. that I think perhaps now the phrase of the musical invention might be justified. Thank you.